spoke about paradigms that you need to cast away. The existence of time for money. When money is being printed out of thin air, your life is being eroded away by those few at the top. Reality is the world is set up in a specific way. The schooling system is set up in a specific way. And the roadmap you had in front of you as you were going through life was a specific way. And if you followed that path, you did great at school, you got great grades, you went to university to get a great degree. Does that lead to freedom, or does that lead to you being a lifelong employee, a lifelong slave of time for money, and simply rewarding the people at the top by paying your taxes, paying your bank mortgage, paying interest, whilst your savings and money is eroded away? Our parents' generation had it different because the world was different. Back then, with an average salary, you could save your way towards buying a property. But with current inflation rates, current interest rates, current property prices, an employee simply cannot afford to have even a single one-bedroom house in central London. House prices across the world, cost of living across the world has skyrocketed, whereas salaries have barely moved an inch. The game is different now, and we can't follow our forefathers. We can't follow the blueprint for success that many before us maybe followed. And I say that to simply say I almost followed that path. I come from humble beginnings as a Pakistani, with generations above me not coming from wealth at all. Being an immigrant family towards the UK, I went all the way to graduating as a dentist, got my doctorate degree, and decided no. In fact, as I jokingly say, I retired upon graduation because I realized leverage was the only way, and now, almost 10 years later, I've been forming that path to unlock the freedoms that I have. And I am nothing special, I am simply someone just like you who understood there's a crack in the code. There is a way you can ascend the hierarchies of life and truly live life on your terms by simply understanding leverage. So the first thing I need you to understand on this road to wealth generation is this term called escape velocity. So if you don't know what the term means, it actually comes from rocket science and is defined by the speed a rocket has to go to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. And as you can imagine, that speed is immense to escape the Earth's gravitational pull. In fact, it's 11 kilometers per second or 7 miles per second. And just like the gravitational forces pulling down on the rockets, preventing it to go into space, we have these same forces pulling us down, preventing us from generating true wealth. With inflation, taxes, asset appreciation, cost of living rising, these are all forces pulling us down, keeping us in the lower levels of hierarchy in society, always being slaves to the system, always evolving with just simply time for money. And all of these forces are so powerful that even the best paying job, even the most respected career, is not actually able to truly escape and have that escape velocity. And the goal of this video, in pursuit of generating true wealth, is for you to understand the power of leverages, how to capitalize on that crack in the code in the system for you to truly reach that financial escape velocity. Because right now you're probably living in an economy where they take 50% of your income directly from your paycheck without you even having a say. And if you do ascend the ranks a little bit, maybe you set up an LLC, and maybe you are able to write off some costs, write off that travel expense, write off your laptop, and maybe save a 5% on your tax bill. And you know what's the saddest thing? Our parents work their whole life to save money, to give us a better life. And when they do pass away, the government puts their hand in their pocket, in their assets, and takes 50% of that wealth that took a lifetime to create, and they call it an inheritance tax. And you think everybody pays taxes? Whilst you are giving away large sums of your net worth away to the taxman. Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, a US company, is actually headquartered in Ireland for tax savings. Tons of software companies are relocating from California towards Texas just to have better tax laws. And digital nomads, individual entrepreneurs, they can pick up and leave and go towards a Puerto Rico or a Dubai, where it's tax-free. So if these big companies, these huge conglomerates, these trusts, they are able to choose their tax laws, why can't you? Why are you not given that privilege? The reality is you can. You can achieve all of the above freedoms and not only achieve just financial escape velocity, you are able to do this in a shorter amount of time than ever before. This is the best time to make wealth in history as long as you have these few tools. The paradigm shift I want to give you is no longer just make more money for your time. It's work with leverage. A principle as old as time itself. In fact, it was Archimedes, one of the most important thinkers in human history, who said that if you give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, I will move the earth. And that concept is just simple physics. The closer you are to the object, the shorter of a lever you have, the harder it is to move that object. But once you increase the size of that lever, you have more leverage. You are able to move great masses with small forces. And therefore, from that principle from Archimedes, that's where the word leverage comes from. And truly understanding the power of leverage. Like he said, with a lever long enough, you can move the world. It's not about making your hours worth more. This is all work without leverage, because the reality is those that work the hardest aren't the ones that make the most wealth. The average person working construction, who are truly working blood, sweat and tears, working long hours, truly hard work, they are simply paid minimum wage. Whereas one of those CEOs in a boardroom with air condition and a $10,000 suit, they are simply making phone calls, having meetings and making life-changing wealth year upon year. They do not work as hard, they just simply work with leverage. So now that we've understood where leverage comes from, now that we've understood the power of leverage, let's start unveiling what these leverages are. The 5 leverages in life towards financial escape velocity and true wealth generation. So let's start off with the first one. One that I'm sure you're very familiar with, and that is labor. Now, labor may be a sensitive topic for some because since childhood, it's been ingrained in us from our families, from our friends, from the schooling system, from the movies we watch, that the way to build wealth is you have to work for it. You have to work hard and earn your money. And in some sense, it is true. The person that does work hard, the person that does study hard is able to get a better job and therefore earn more money. And it's simply market laws of supply and demand. The harder your skill set is to achieve, the less replaceable it is, the more you will make. And in this case, it is a simple game of inputs to outputs. The more you put in, the more you will get out. But the reason labor is truly leverage is for another reason. You can take the example that I had of being a dentist. I could work longer hours. I could work on the weekends and maybe achieve $100,000 salary, maybe $150,000 per year as someone that would have been a high paid employee. But now taking the example of Elon Musk, where he has more than 150,000 employees working tirelessly towards his dreams, his goals, and creating wealth for him. And later on, we'll get into the other types of leverages that he's using. But for now, when it comes to labor leverage, if he was just working himself, he has 24 hours in a day. Maybe in a working week, he can get 100 hours of max output. But if you take that same 100 hours and you multiply it by 150,000 workers, he gets millions and millions and millions of hours of work per week. And no individual can compete with that. No matter how much your time is worth, no matter how hard you work, no matter how long you work, you cannot compete with someone that has deployed labor leverage. And even if you came up with a better electric car than Tesla, with a better battery life, with better distance, with better design, with better ergonomics, it was better in every capacity, Elon Musk would be able to outcompete you because he was utilizing labor leverage and therefore make millions of dollars for himself and his shareholders by just creating way more cars at economies of scale for cheaper, faster, and worldwide. Now, how can one person compete with that? The answer is you simply can't. Now, there's a problem with labor is the fact that it's not accessible to everyone. And I'm sure you know this problem from first hand, let alone the money side. When you have those group projects at school, when you have a team of 5 as a class project, you will have one guy that's working really hard, giving ideas, taking lead, and then there's the other guy just sitting at the back, chilling, waiting for the deadline submission and waiting to get his grade and credits without doing anything. It's hard to motivate people. It's hard to incentivize people. It's hard to make people work hard and be passionate within your vision and work towards your dreams. But even though it is a very powerful form of leverage, it is still one of the most complicated and inaccessible form of leverage. But when you have wealth, of course, it becomes a lot easier and accessible because to motivate people, you can simply give them a higher salary. You can give them a better office, better perks, better trips, better company culture and experience. And therefore, they feel proud to work towards your vision because you incentivize them correctly. But that only comes when you have enough resource to do so. And therefore, that problem brings me nicely onto the next form of leverage, that is leveraging capital. Capital is more of a modern invention. Back in the day, if you wanted to eat, you needed to hunt. If you wanted to have clothes, you had to make fabric. If you wanted to have shelter, you had to build it. And the problem became that each individual was so consumed with just survival, getting enough food, water, shelter, that their whole week was consumed with just survival, the bottom portion of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But when you had the creation of money, then you could tokenize these things. You could tokenize cattle, you could tokenize food, you could tokenize shelter, you could tokenize everything. And therefore, the more valuable my resource was, the more tokens I could collect. Tokens, of course, being money. So instead of me now going to exchange my cows for another person's shelter, I could actually just exchange money. But back then, wealth was a zero-sum game. There was no way to create new wealth. You simply could exchange your resources for money, and therefore your wealth was capped by the resources you had. The amount of cattle I had was the wealth I had. The amount of land I had, and therefore the amount of produce I could create, was the wealth I could have. And so what did these medieval kings do back in the day? To create more wealth, they had to go out and conquer. They had to conquer societies. They had to conquer more land so that they could create more wealth, because they could produce more, because they had access to more. Because back then, there was simply no other way to create more wealth. But in the present day, of course, that does not exist. Now you can utilize capital to buy more technology, buy more machinery, access more labor, access technology, access even intellectual property, access the banking system and interest rates, access bonds, and therefore get fixed returns from the government backed by the taxpayer. In this day and age, you can make your money work for you. Your money can earn more money on itself, and that is the form of capital leverage. Now let's say you're an individual that discovered an oil reserve with billions of dollars of oil under the land. Somebody would pay you a lot of money to know where it is. Now the next level would be you own that land. Someone would pay you a lot of money to buy that land off you with the oil right underneath. If you were someone that had access to the machinery or the expertise and the know-how to actually extract that oil, you would be paid a lot of money. But notice how the person that had the knowledge of where it is or how to extract it is simply someone that is paid for their time and expertise. That time for money, non-leveraged work. But if you were someone that simply had capital, you could pay someone to go and find where the oil fields are. You could pay to buy those oil fields. You could pay for the machinery. You could pay for the expertise to extract it. You could pay for the labor, you could pay for the refinement process, and you could make billions of dollars of wealth for yourself without having to lift a finger. You simply use your capital. And you could take this a level further with capital. You could actually be in complete ownership of the supply chain, from the oil in the ground to the gas in the cars and every single entity in between. Full vertical integration and a complete ownership of a supply chain. And you didn't have to be an expert in any. You didn't have to do any manual labor yourself. You simply had to deploy your capital to access the rest. And that's exactly how one of the wealthiest humans in history generated his wealth. That is John D. Rockefeller. Because he maximized all of the value that there was to achieve by extracting oil and became one of the first billionaires in history. And how did he do that? By leveraging capital to its maximum extent. Now, capital, once again, is not the easiest form of leverage, and in fact, not even a beginner accessible form of leverage, because if you don't have millions of dollars lying around, you can't really benefit from the fruits of compounding interest. More importantly, even if you did have the capital, you need skill to know how to deploy that capital, because with capital comes risk. And as you know, 90% of startups fail. They lose their whole capital. And some companies